it has an incredible depth of knowledge on constitutional, common and natural law. He is the founder of Peacekeepers, and the emphasis is on peace, which has assisted many people across the country to use our law, our rights, our power, our sovereignty to successfully challenge those who are abusing it. It enables us to take the responsibility to reclaim our rights through action. Now, Marc often says that we the people have the power, not our government. And it is just about knowing, and it isn't actually just about knowing our rights and our laws. It's embracing the truth of who we are. And from that place, taking action. Because as Marc says, and it's up there, knowledge gives people confidence. And when you see people act, it gives you the courage. So a huge warm welcome to Marc for being here in Stroud with us and passing on some of his knowledge.
Well, I'm deeply honoured that you all have taken time out of your busy schedules. Time is something that is really important to everybody. Seriously, what a fantastic turnout. It's really, really great to be here. I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't know already, okay? I want to just start off with a bit of background. I was born in South Africa. I'm actually German. I've lived most of my life in the Middle East. I've travelled a lot of the world except for South America. And this whole thing started off like everything else in life. When there's the right motivation, that's what creates change. So, yep, I've been in the rat race, know all about it. Used to be the world's biggest conspiracy theorist. Until I always had a social conscience. Now, when we left South Africa in 78, it was still apartheid, all right? I didn't know or understand what apartheid was until I got to Kuwait. Okay? Because if you want to see racism and stuff like that, okay, everything is relative. So anyway, Kate and I, she's over there, we were living on a boat. We both went to Kuwait in 96, we got married in 2000 or 2001, in India on a beach. Kate retired, so to speak, like 5 years before me, saying, come on, let's get on the boat, let's travel the seas. I had 2 kids from my first marriage, and so in the rat race, working, spending money on kids, blah, blah, blah. When my son graduated, and his first year, basically, he almost got thrown out because he did 10 hours of lectures. Incredibly bright kid. My daughter's also incredibly bright. And walked straight into a good job. All of a sudden started saving a bit of money. Then 2 years later, my daughter qualified, walked straight into a good job, and then we were saving money, and then it's like, one of my friends died of a heart attack. He was a month older than me. And the whole realization was then, what on earth am I doing this for? So that's when I started to reevaluate this whole thing. So we went part-time in 2013. We sailed out of Kuwait down to, in fact, it was February. It might have been within a week or so. So like 10 years ago, we sailed out of Kuwait. We went down to Oman. And I've been working part-time. So I go back to Kuwait, do roughly 1 to 2 weeks every 4 to 6 weeks, which is where I was 2 days ago. So with this then, with the kids out, it allowed us to live our lives. So yes, I fully know the rat race. Kate's mum got ill, she came back. We don't have a public pension, and so we invested in a flat in Liverpool in 2012. That went fine, but that works out at roughly 250 quid a month, average over the year. We needed 2 more so that we could have a reasonable standard of living without having to have a full-time job. We invested in another property up in Leeds, which was an off-plan property, and that there was a development which was part of a massive government drive, international, targeting specifically Taiwanese, Far Eastern, Chinese, Taiwan, Thailand, all of that money. Okay? And all of these developments went bust. And essentially, an estimate that people work on, it's over a £250 million fraud. Big money. This is serious. I was involved in one project. Okay, 2 student buildings renting out to, we paid the money to develop it and rent out the flats. So when they went bust, I thought, You stupid idiots, you owe me money. I paid 50 grand and, my flat or something. So I went after the directors in person. And guess what? In England, you don't do things like that, do you? You English have got some really funny things going on here. So, long story short, my learning lesson cost me 80 grand on top of the 50 grand. Okay? But the first hearing that I lost cost me 40 grand, and I had a choice. I could go and continue with my conspiratorial nonsense and blame other people for all my problems. Instead, I chose to read the judgment, and that's what's changed everything. Because guess what? Judgments must be reasoned, and law is about logic and reason. And the judgment told me what I did right, and it told me what I did wrong. No jury trial can give me that. You can't question a jury trial. Anyway, I lost the next one in the absolute belief that I would win. I lost that. That cost me another 40 grand. So on the 20th to the 23rd, sometime in then, the final appeal is being heard. I've got a date for it. So it's started that in 2018, and it's coming to an end now. This stuff takes time. And so people need to understand what is actually happening. How does this work? Everything starts with thought. I knew. Why? Because my conscience told me. This is wrong. You guys have taken 50 grand, and the directors have bought all these properties in Spain and spent all my money everywhere else. It's wrong. So what can I do about it? I went in, not naively, because a lot of my working history is contract law. Contract law is about being pedantic. Because those of you that are familiar with contracts, you don't get the job unless you're the cheapest bidder. To be able to make profit then, you need to know all of the errors in the contract. That allows you to manipulate your bid to be able to get what's called a variation order for their mistakes. Okay? So then with the second hearing, I lost that as well. But I learned an awful lot just there. So I want to dispel a few myths so that you start to open your mind to all possibility. As soon as you stop opening your mind, okay, you are limiting what is possible. So myths, we'll be looking at some myths, but the one I want to start off with is, who's heard of the Justinian deception? And the language fraud, and it's all about the words, and writing your name with 2 dots here and stuff like that. Utter bollocks. All right? However, when I got into the court, what I'd written, the format, okay, was crap. But the substance that I argued was good. And equity prevails, and equity is substance over form. And the judge ordered me to resubmit my particulars of claim, giving me guidance to say, go and read the civil procedure rules and try and follow that format, will you? Okay? So that was my first lesson, that a lot of my previous beliefs, my cynicism, my conspiratorial, all of this, dispelled. Okay? That's happened to me 3 times. All right? So let me just explain substance over form to you, because people waste so much energy, and it's energy. Your time is your energy. You choose where you take your energy. So people say, when you get a speeding ticket, oh, it's not me because the name's written in all caps, that's not me. Or, I wasn't driving, okay, I was traveling. Or, I wasn't in a vehicle or a car, I was in a vehicle or a conveyance. Okay, that's all form. The substance is, was your mind in control of your body, which was in control of their thing, which was traveling at this speed, at that place, at that time? That's equity. Substance over form. So how you write your name, forget about it. You're wasting your time. Absolutely irrelevant. And guess what? People that argue that, even with councils, your name's in these big capital letters, and then you say, no, write it like this, guess what? The council will change it and write it however you want. We cannot exist without legal fictions. Just me saying my name is Mark is a legal fiction. How do we remember one another's telephone numbers or contact one another? Okay? I don't even know Kate's phone number. I know it's 2233, something like that. I know it rhymes, but I don't actually know the rhyme. It took me about 3 years to learn my English mobile number. What we do is we associate a fiction with a number. So everybody programs in a telephone number, but associates it with a name. That's a legal fiction. Essentially, we cannot exist without the use of legal fictions. It would be impossible. So, we'll be talking about a lot of these things because what we need to do is concentrate the energy into productive energy. Okay? So, that's why I say, what I'm going to be talking about, and please interrupt me as we go through it, ask whatever question you like, I'll tell you if it's irrelevant or if I'll cover it later. Okay? So just butt in, because every single thing that I say, I need to be able to stand on it. You need to see and have the confidence that the evidence shows it's true, because then it resonates with you. When it resonates with you, okay, this thing about confidence, once you gain knowledge, you get confident. That gives you the courage to test your comfort zone. Okay? You'll take baby steps as your knowledge increases. When other people in the crowd see that, oh my God, he's still alive, he's okay. What happens is, they have confidence now in your knowledge. Whilst they're starting to learn, they don't take baby steps because you're okay out there. They have the courage to take big steps. So this is an example of the fractal universe, the way things work. Okay? What one does is at this scale. Next ones then follow. This is the ripple effect. So once people see they're out of the crowd, that it's okay to be there, that then gets the rest to start moving. Human nature is so important. We need to understand how people behave and what is normal. So my mum hated it when I used to say, to me, guess what? We do as little as possible for as much as possible. Human nature. Adam Smith in the mid-1700s wrote The Wealth of Nations, and he expressed it as the invisible hand. Everybody acts out of self-interest. So we need to have systems of governance of how we govern ourselves, where we take into account human nature, for human nature. If we don't, we are straying from truth, and the truth will prevail, and every time we bang up there, the truth will just knock down all the untruths. So this is what it's about, finding the truth. And that there's a self-journey. Nobody can do it for you other than you. I can't come and fix your problems. People, 80%, 90% of the people say, oh, I've got a speeding ticket, or oh, I'm here to the council tax, oh, I've got the bailiffs at the door. I can't help you. All I can do is guide you to the knowledge, because only you can help yourself. Okay? So Peacekeepers isn't a free legal service or anything like that. It's about teaching people their rights, how they're expressed in law, and what is law. What is common law? Okay? Until we know these fundamental questions, the answers to them, we can't unravel the puzzle. All I've done is, I was very lucky that my secretary was very good in Kuwait. My job basically is to go to Kuwait, drink coffee, sign the salary transfers, and occasionally go and see the boss, and I don't really know. I did have to go out to a meeting when I was there last week, but that's like the first, I haven't left the factory in years, sort of thing. Okay. But we need, what I did there was, what I've come up with is nothing new. There is nothing new under the sun, and you'll see today, I'll show you there's nothing new under the sun. The problem we face today was discussed by Plato and Cicero and them all back in 2,000 years ago. Exactly the same problem. The problem is, We've not integrated truth into our governance systems. And that's why we're still talking about it today. So if we look at this nonsense going on with, I don't know, this alleged protagonist CV19 or whatever, humanity has not learnt the lesson. We've strayed from the truth. We down dogma, theory, beliefs, okay? That germ theory versus terrain theory. Two different beliefs. However, one of them you could materialize and take advantage and put your self-interest above the other one. I.e., if I control knowledge, then I can self-benefit through the material realm. So, vaccines is something that, by selling the germ theory, and Pasteur had lots of mates up in Parliament, or the equivalent of it there at the time, and they cut a little deal, okay, and sorted it out between themselves, that old Paul Bouchon, who Pasteur plagiarized anyway, and, got pushed out to the side so that they could live in the material. Along came Koch and said, this just seems so irrational what you guys are doing, and brought in Koch's postulates. Then along came the Spanish flu, and they looked at all of their beliefs, and guess what they did? Some experiments, some science to verify and validify their beliefs. So what they did, and most of you, I'm guessing, probably know all of this, but basically they lined up sick people, got healthy volunteers. They went face to face, breathing in and out one another's air. The sick ones coughing and spewing all over the healthy ones. They moved to the next one, and guess what? Nobody got sick. What was the rational conclusion? I don't think this is airborne. Therefore, cross that off the list of their beliefs. They took sputum and everything out of the sick and put it into the healthy volunteers. Nobody got sick. Cross that one off the list. They took blood and injected it into the healthy one. Nobody got sick. Therefore, their whole belief system, through the best methods, the scientific method, could not stand up to truth. And they did experiments where they took their alleged vaccines, and there were 35 brands at the time claiming to be the miracle cure. And they had isolated places, and they took into an isolated place and injected every second person, and within 2 weeks they were sick. Their conclusion was vaccines don't work. What other rational conclusion could be drawn from that experiment? Vaccines are the problem. Okay? So it's how we look at these things that is extremely important. And as a result of it, the American Medical Association said, unless you can fulfill Koch's postulates, i.e., here is the evidence that this protagonist exists, how on earth can you claim that you've got a fix for the problem? And therefore they introduced that you have to prove scientifically that your vaccine works. And there were no vaccines until 1950s, polio. So from 1919 to 1950s, that was it. So something changed then, and that there's really this stuff about genetics and all of that, because we couldn't verify it, and all that had changed. If a lion bites you, I can see the effects of it, i.e. I can observe it. All that changed is anything that cannot be observed goes into the realm of magic, okay? And therefore, magic, we can bullshit our way through to be able to benefit from it. It take advantage of others, okay? Which is fraudulent deception. So when we came back, Kate's mum was seriously ill. She died. We bought her brother's share of the house out. Thought quickly we'll redecorate this place, let it out and get back on the boat. Started pulling off the wallpaper, boom, half the plaster came down, old house, rebuilt it, took a while. But got involved with the anti-fracking protests. We were involved in Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire. Now, I don't know if people have heard of Ian Crane. Yeah. Okay. Amazing guy, learnt a lot, applied knowledge wisely. In North Yorkshire, very quickly, the fracking was finished. As opposed to in other areas with these fracking campaigns, they were unsuccessful or relatively unsuccessful. The reason they were unsuccessful was they were infiltrated. And Blackpool, which was a massive thing there, that was like the centre of it, was infiltrated and total bollocks. Now, there's a guy called Joe Boyd, and he's written a book, Kill Bill, which is all about his journey in the anti-fracking community. In there he names names, and essentially the same people from, remember the Occupy movement? Are the same people in the anti-fracking movement, are the same people of Extinction Rebellion. All the same. Okay? Now what Ian taught us was no top down. I was woken up at midnight to say, will you drive a car at 6 in the morning? Why? Will you drive a car at 6 in the morning, yes or no? I didn't even know why I was driving the car. Nobody knew what anybody else was doing. And nobody could infiltrate. Simple. Okay? And that's why it was so successful. And that's what I'm trying to create with the Peacekeepers, a decentralized grassroots movement where truth resonates with the people and all the different communities can do what they like. But what we all have in common, and we all have in common, is globally. Every single human is connected through the conscience. The conscience is the energy of the universe. We are all one. Okay? And our conscience tells us what's right and wrong. Marc, I don't know if people have heard of him. Natural law, okay? He's brilliant. And he is driving home this thing. There's no relative right or relative wrong. There is right or wrong, end of, okay? None of this pussyfooting around, sitting on the fence. Our conscience tells us right from wrong. Natural law is really simple, absolutely simple. Follow your conscience, which dictates right from wrong. So long as you don't knowingly cause another harm. So everybody can do what the hell they like, so long as they followed their due diligence before they act. When somebody comes with better knowledge, they stand on their rights and stop that action. The person that has a believed right then is in a position where they must cease and prove their right, because everybody else is innocent until proven guilty, and he who asserts must prove. So you create a cease and desist your belief until this dispute is settled. You've proven your claim. So as soon as anybody does something which may cause harm, and you have that knowledge, you have an obligation to keep the peace. So if you witness some harm being done, and you have knowledge about it, you must do something about it under your obligation to keep the peace. Because guess what? Turning a blind eye is breaching the peace. Therefore, you are knowingly causing harm. So those who stand on their rights harm no one. Those who don't have none. That's how simple natural law is. Okay? So that's the foundations of the Peacekeepers. So when I got involved in Kirby Misperton, okay, there's video somewhere with me in this hat, and I haven't got the other jumper, which was a little bit too warm for today. Going into the post office, doing the old registered post and all of this sort of stuff, certified mail, sent it off to North Yorkshire Police. And the reason for this is the fool's journey, tarot cards. We all start out life as the fool until we find our truths. Okay, and that's what the tarot is all about. The major arcana is finding your truth. I sent off my 3 notices to North Yorkshire. Oh, hang on, before I sent those, in the field in North Yorkshire, I had to test all of this stuff. So they were arresting people on breaches of the Trade Unions Act, whatever year it was. So I printed off the Trade Unions Act, sort of like read a few bits. Have you read the introductory text of an Act of Parliament, anybody? Yeah. No? We'll look at it, but essentially what it says, being enacted by the most glorious monarch, by and with the advice of the Lord Spiritual, Temporal, and the Commons, in this present Parliament assembled by authority of the same. That's what gives that piece of paper authority. Okay? So I went up to the policeman, and when you're talking to people individually, they're very different from when they're in a crowd. And I go up to them and say, what do you think about this? What gives you authority? What's your oath? All of this sort of stuff. And so when they tried to move us on, when a convoy came, basically they move you on so that you don't disrupt the companies making lots of profit. So when the policeman came up to me, I said, you see your name and my name on this act? But I said then, which trade union do you believe I'm a member of? Because this act even if I have joined her, I must be a member of the trade union. Show me the evidence of which trade union you believe me to be. They couldn't. What happened there? Cease and desist until you prove your claim. So guess what? They left me alone. But they carried on with this crap with everybody else. So they had to call a meeting with the police that night, because the next day it was an obstruction of the highways. No more trade unions nonsense, because they were worried that Marc spoke to everybody, and now everybody knew how to stop this nonsense. So they had to come up with plan B, crisis management. This is all they know. When they come into a problem, they react. And so anybody that thinks there's a group of 300 or 10 or 1 or a million controlling this nonsense, forget it. It does not work like that. They are crisis managers, looking after their self-interest. So copper comes up. This is a small lane, single lane, grass verge, ditch, hedge. And they come up and say, oh, you've got to move, mate. Why? Oh, you're obstructing the highway. Really? Can you see anybody I'm obstructing this way, Mr. Policeman? No. Well, nor can I. Can you see anybody I'm obstructing that way? No, nor can I. However, Mr. Policeman, I suggest those 2 police vans, which are parked on the verge and half into the road, are definitely obstructing the highway, forcing vehicles off the road. I suggest you go and get them moved. Guess what? They moved the vans, gone. Yeah. Again, those who stand on their rights harm no one. Those who don't, because with everybody else, they carried on with their nonsense. So the third day, it was for your health and safety. Oh, thank you, that's very kind. I'm quite happy, I'm an adult, I look after myself, but should I inadvertently oversee something, please feel free to shout. So this stuff worked with that. However, they still would physically retain me. So fundamentally, paper works, but until you have the force, equal force, you don't have enforcement of your rights. Essentially, if you want your rights enforced, you need a nuclear bomb, mate. That's one option. However, what's different with what we're doing here now is using knowledge. So the way that it works is quite simply, you follow your conscience, which dictates right from wrong. If nobody stands on it, you just continue. You have a duty of care not to knowingly cause another harm. That duty of care involves you best apply your mind as best you know. So we have Google available, we have many things available, we can talk to one another. So you need to gather the knowledge first to see what's reasonable for me to do or not, and then I can act. When somebody else comes with better knowledge, they create a cease and desist. And if they don't cease and desist, now we need to create our record, gather the evidence that they are knowingly causing harm. So, can you just get sacked at work? No. This is what you guys are used to. And first, if you do something wrong, they need to tell you what you're doing wrong. Then they must give you an opportunity to remedy, change your behavior. Then, if you continue, they give you a written warning. If you still don't change, then you get a second warning, and then you get kicked out. Okay? So, the notices, what is that? Notice means take notice. Do we take notice? No. Whenever they do stuff, they make notices. They give you the opportunity to get involved. However, we just don't understand all of this. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where to find it. Okay? At the moment, people are putting out about this digital ID. Guess what? That's the notice. This is our intent. Before we act, give us your feedback. So, council tax bill, they send you a notice, a bill. It's a claim. You owe us this money. All right? So, if you stand on your rights, it should cease the situation and resolve it before it continues. So, if it doesn't continue, you send them a notice. What am I doing with my first notice, the caution notice? I am putting them with the knowledge that this is what the law says, and you must prove your claim that you're not doing harm, and this is why I believe you might be causing harm. But as you are claiming the right, I've shown you reasonable grounds to breach your peace. This is why I think it might be causing harm. But you as the claimant must prove that you're not causing harm. So if they don't cease and desist, okay, this is where the ego kicks in, the closed mind. If I'm doing something wrong and somebody comes up to me and says, hey man, that's wrong. Okay, what choices have I got? Oh shit, okay, hang on, I'll stop, you're right, let me just check this out before I carry on doing it. Honest mistake. If I do not, and I ignore that, I'm now negligent. Because somebody else has brought to my attention that I may be causing harm, and I have no right to cause harm. So I'm moving the mind from an honest mistake mind into a negligent mind. I send the next reminder to say, hey, I've told you, you may be causing harm. So that's my reminder notice. And if you don't cease then and continue, not only are you no longer acting negligently, you're now acting grossly negligent. Okay? So through the notice procedure, what I'm doing is creating the only two things the courts look at: the act and the state of mind. Nothing else matters. Those are the only two things. The act and the state of mind. Okay? So I can evidence the facts with two witnesses now. Because the facts are my first notice, and my first reminder is witness one, that you were the facts, and witness my second reminder, or my final warning, or letter before action, is my second witness that I put you with the facts. So I can now take you to court with the facts established with two witnesses, because from the mouths of two witnesses may the truth be established. From the Bible, it tells us. So that's the only thing that I'm doing with the notice procedure. Putting people with knowledge and then moving them into, by creating the evidence, the record, in order to try and get enforcement then in the public courts if I cannot resolve matters in private. Okay? So society should be run, it should be so simple. We should have heaven on earth. So if we look at what happened with Sue down in Land's End, she lives down near Land's End, went for more than 5 miles from her home to for a walk. How dare she? So she drove, and a policeman pulled her up and gave her a fine because she didn't have a reasonable excuse as to why she was more than 5 miles from home going for a walk. What reasonable excuse is equity. Give me a good reason. Okay, i.e., stand on your rights. But if you don't know your rights, you can't give a reasonable excuse. So what happened in Kirby and Misperton, they left me alone in round one, putting me with the knowledge. In accordance with the Trade Unions Act, you can't do what you're doing, or in accordance with the obstruction of the highways, you can't do what you're doing. And what they do is, because they act very honourably, the police, the whole system is very simple. What they do is, they know, because somebody phoned them, that they've got a convoy coming in 15 minutes. So what they do is, oi, you bunch, better move, because there's a convoy coming in 15 minutes. Got a problem with that? Then they come back, 10 minutes. Oi, told you guys to move. Why haven't you moved? Witness one of having put you in the facts. I told you why you got to move, and you better move. And then they go away. And then they come back with witness two, 2 or 3 minutes before the convoy gets there. Oi, I told you twice to move. They're now giving you another opportunity to move. You've not rebutted their claim, therefore, guess what? They have a lawful right to move you physically. That's called the default judgment. Council sends you a bill, you don't rebut it, you return to sender because it's written in big letters or whatever you want to do, doesn't matter, they'll send you a reminder, and then they'll send you your summons. Put you with the fact of their belief, you've not rebutted their belief, they've sent their first witness, they've sent their second witness, now pay up in 14 days, otherwise we go to court. Then if you don't engage in the court's not quite so generous. The court says you don't come, you end up with a default judgment. The council goes in, the council asks for a liability order, and if you don't challenge it, he who asks gets, they get their default judgment. So with the councils getting the default judgments, over 90% of, the liability orders, over 90% of them are because you don't stand on your rights. You end up with the default judgment. You have breached their peace by not responding to their claim. You've dishonoured them. By you not engaging with them, you are acting in dishonour, and therefore now you're breaching their peace. So this nonsense of just return to sender and all of this, eventually they'll catch up with you, won't they, Dijon? How many years? It's a matter of time. That's equity at work. Okay? It's all about honor, good faith, and clean hands. Honor means my word is my bond, I walk my talk. I.e., if I enter a contract, I bloody well do what I said I'd do. Why? Because when I enter into it, then I am agreeing to the rights and obligations in there. And if I don't uphold my rights and don't fulfill my obligations, I am breaching another's peace. I'm trespassing on them. Okay? So honor means I walk my talk, my word is my bond. Good faith means I do not put my self-interest above that of anybody else. And clean hands means there's no underhand dealings. Okay? And that is the whole basis of common law contract. There needs to be a full disclosure so there can be a meeting of minds without any mental or physical coercion, and then agreeing to the duties, rights, and obligations. And that is what law is. Law, in the context of courts and man-made law, is purely contract law, nothing else. If there is no consent, then there is no obligation. We'll talk about that later, but what I'd like to do is just quickly introduce, if I can work this out. Okay? Truth is the sovereign, not you, not me, not the king, not parliament, but truth. Sovereign means the power to act. So it doesn't matter what you believe, the truth will prevail. It's just a matter of time. So natural law is truth. And it's very, very simple. Truth is always simple. It will prevail in time. It's game over already, okay? If we look at the fractal universe, time, what's happening at the moment, I've already said, 2,000 years ago they were arguing exactly the same argument, basically absolute tyranny and absolute anarchy. Most people don't understand the true meaning of the word anarchy. It does not mean no governance. It means self-governance. I govern myself not to knowingly cause another harm. Self-governance. So 2,000 years they've been debating this nonsense. Then in the 1600s, basically we had the printing press, which allowed knowledge to filter from the 1% to the 10%. That created the new discussions and thoughts and ideas about human rights. So you've got all the philosophers from there, Mills and, I don't know, endless philosophers from there, okay? Which resulted in the revolutions in Europe, because what we had was the divine right of kings, and with the revolutions they culminated in the US Declaration of Independence, which starts as we the people. So a 2,000-year argument, basically now we're into 300 years ago. And it's taken us 300 years ago to work out what the thought of we the people, we all equal under the law, nobody's above the law, was expressed in the Declaration of Independence. What does we the people mean? Hence, we've gone through the anti-slavery stuff, we've gone through the women's lib, we've gone through racism, all of this stuff. Because we had to manifest the thought which was expressed. So what we're living through at the moment is the new reality being created. The Bill of Rights is a contract between the people at the time, 6 lords, and the royal prerogative. And that ended the divine right of kings to rule. What happened before that? Anybody heard of this document called Magna Carta 1215, I think? Any of you familiar with that? You ever heard of that? Yeah? Okay. Basically, how many of you were around in 1215? No one? So what the hell's it got to do with you for starters? However, you need to understand the history. I hated history at school, but now I've done more history and more religious studies than I've done in my whole life in the last 5 years, because it's amazing stuff. If you don't understand the history, the intent behind it, okay, you will not understand. You just won't get it. So the first thing is, I've said at the Bill of Rights, the divine right of kings stopped. What is the divine right of kings? The divine right of kings is simply, my creations I own. And because these are concepts of law, the law that I've created dies with me. So when James I died, that was it. There was no Magna Carta 1215 anymore. Finished. What happened was the next king then would cherry pick what they want to bring into their reign from the previous king, which was essentially common law. What had they established already, they can't get away with. The people won't tolerate it. They've drawn the line in sand here. So they would cherry pick and pull into the start of their reign and do something called confirmation of the charters. Have any of you ever heard of that? Okay. So essentially, this is the process until what changed in the Bill of Rights was they created the legal fiction called Parliament, okay, and it was Parliament assembled, a legal fiction that took over the royal prerogative and hence no more divine right of kings. Because fictions don't die. And so that they gave continuity and hence what they call parliamentary sovereignty, or the belief. Okay? But
I'd like
time...
to ask how you make a truth determination, because I find truth is subjective. What amount is truth is untruth?
Correct.
All the products of our education, our
Correct.
experiences are written.
The scientific method, and I'm very specific, not science or peer-reviewed science, the scientific method is our best way of establishing truth in the material realm. Okay? I agree with you, it's subjective. Okay? However, that gets tested. And for something to be true, it must be true all the time. So let's take a simple example. Can government tell you what to do? Through an act of parliament. To test the truth, you take it to its absurdity. So, for some reason, April Fool's joke maybe, Parliament enacts 1st of April, everybody's got to jump off the cliffs of Dover. Would you do it? No, obviously not. Therefore, it's impossible for acts of Parliament to be law. It's not enforceable. There are constraints. But basically, it's through the cross-examination of the evidence which gives us the best truth, and the best truth is based upon, bless you, our knowledge at the time. So, truth is not fixed in stone, because we don't know the unknown. However, based on our knowledge today, this is our best truth. Okay? So truth is something that moves and is related to knowledge. And I would say a fact is something that over an extended period of time has stood the test of truth. So, something like that. Okay. Right. And so basically what we're living through now is the manifestation of a 2,000-year argument which was expressed as a result of the printing press allowing knowledge to filter down into the greater population. And guess what's happening now? 1% to 10% resulted in the expression of the thoughts which have taken 300 years to manifest, and now the internet's allowing that to move down to 90% of the population. That's it. Game over. Okay? You've got black magic and white magic and all of these nefarious conspiratorial Klaus Schwabs behind the scene. It doesn't work. Okay? What is magic? Magic is simply dark, knowledge in the dark. You don't know how the trick is done. And it's through the internet, which is now allowing this to filter through to 80%. And we are going through the discernment of how do we establish truth and how don't we? Because everybody has their opinion, it's out on the internet. But which one is true? We need to follow the evidence and apply our best available knowledge to see what's truth. And guess what? Truth will resonate with you anyway. It's the knowing. You know what is right and you know what is wrong. Okay? And if you disagree with me, feel free to tell me. So knowledge is light, ignorance is darkness. The material is all about light. Black magic only has power over you if you grant it. You will manifest what you believe. If you believe that word magic has power over you, it has power over you. Okay, if you believe the number 13 is unlucky, It will be unlucky for you. Whatever you believe, you will manifest. Okay? And most of it is utter crap. So why is the number 13 unlucky? Any guesses?
Superstition. Superstition.
Judas.
Does anybody know the history behind it or where it came from?
Judas Iscariot.
It's when the Romans were slaughtering the Christians in Europe.
Right, we're getting there.
Yeah.
Basically, what you had is, do you know the difference between Lord's spiritual and Lord's temporal?
Yes.
Lord's spiritual is essentially the thought, okay? So if you look at the Houses of Parliament, you've got the House of Lords, but there's two actual departments in there. The spiritual, Lord's spiritual and Lord's temporal. So what happens is thought, a new thought generates a new reality. So the thought of religion, okay, the Christian idea that all of you peasants should give me some money so that I can live in comfort and at your expense. Basically, if you want to go to God after you die, give me some money. Fear. Okay? So this idea resulted in the concentration of wealth in the few. And guess what? The peasants get pissed off with this and think, hey, this is not fair and just. We're doing all the work and you're just talking crap. And, but we believe the story that, okay, to get to heaven we have to do what you say. All of a sudden then, some of the peasants start to steal the stuff back, which means you need the Lord's temporal, your foot soldiers, to defend the spiritual idea. So wherever an idea is not based in truth, you will need to physically defend that belief. So what happened was the Knights Templars, who were protecting the wealth of the church, and part of the bullshit story was you had to go on pilgrimage. So they set up their little banking system whereby, okay, you deposit your money here and here's a piece of paper, and when you get to Jerusalem, just give it to my mate down there and he'll sort you out down there. And basically, the Lord's temporal started to get more power than the Lord's spiritual. So, who's heard of Unum Sanctum 1302? Okay, this is where the Sesta KV trust nonsense starts. What it says is the way to heaven is through the spiritual path and not the material. And it was a fight between the knights, the Lord's spiritual and the Lord's temporal. And basically, they decided on Friday the 13th, whenever it was, they planned the attack. So it was really bad luck if you were Knights Templar on the 13th, Friday the 13th, whatever year that was. That's why, especially Friday the 13th, is deemed unlucky. But I don't see many buildings with a gap between the 12th and 14th floor. I don't see many aeroplanes with a gap between 12th and 14th rows. So, come on, let's get real. Okay? It's a belief which is not supported by evidence, and that there is pure dogma. So, once we start to understand, and this is why we need to go back as to why things like this have happened, these beliefs have evolved, it allows us to overcome the fear. So the light, the truth, is snuffing out putting light on the knowledge. Okay? And that's the difference between black magic and white magic. So when they talk about all of these underground secret societies and all of that, okay, once you know how the trick's done, it's no more fun, is it? Okay? And that's where we're getting with politics and that today. Okay, so basically, once we start to change our belief system that we must know the answer, we must have a logical or rational explanation, okay? And that's when we start making up this nonsense. Virus used to mean poison, okay? We'll make up nonsense if we have fear. If we don't have fear, we'll simply turn around and say, well, we can't explain it rationally at the moment. But I have faith in the universe, we will find the answer. So when the kids come up to their parents saying, Mummy, why is the sky blue? Shut up, go and ask your teacher. Okay? We need to change the way we interact. That's a bloody good question, kid. When you know the answer, come tell me. Or let's go and see if we can find out. Okay? That's the difference. Ego, as opposed to, I'm the parent, I know everything, I'll tell you everything, to equality. Opening our minds. And it starts with us, with the way we bring up our children. We are the problem. So, basically, I want to just play a little video to show you what I'm talking about here. And this is another explanation of the fractal universe. Come on. Why are you not playing? Okay, and explains different time frames. Okay, one time frame, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all different time frames, fractal universe. That's you.
And there are 13 dominoes.
Oh, 13. But unlucky that.
It weighs about 100 pounds. And it's more than a meter tall.
So look at what you can do. See how it slows down. Okay, that's how powerful each one of us is. Okay, so we need to start learning to direct that positively. And it starts with you. Whoops, wrong button. This is the one that I want. Okay, find your truth. Keep your mind open. Question your truth. Have the courage to test it. If you don't, you will never take those baby steps. Okay? And be the change you want to see. I can't change any of your minds. Only you can. That's your choice. So, what I put together resulted from 1 hour of other people's work. Would take me 8 to 10 hours to watch. Why? Because every single claim they made, I would write down. And then I would go and research and verify it. What I couldn't verify just got crossed out. So I got left with different pieces from many, many different people's works. And over easily 10 years, okay, I've been down every rabbit hole that's, talked about. And all I did was take all of those little bits, okay? They're different colors of a piece of painting. So with the same base knowledge, all I've done is just draw a new picture. So none of this is my original work, nothing. It's all old hat. Okay? And so once you find your truth, be that truth, because when other people see the change in you, and it's a truth they can resonate and something they want, they will come to you. Okay? That's the law of attraction. This nonsense we're told about opposites, positive and negative, north and south pole, when it resonates, okay, and this is because everything is energy, it's about wave interference. I don't know if you guys or anybody has heard about constructive and destructive wave interference. Basically, you get a wave, a sine wave, and if I've got two sine waves, okay, going like that, the sum of it is always 0. Hence, out of nothing, I can create something through the motion of time of equals and opposites. Hence, speech created the movement of the equals and opposites, and light is this reality. So, if I've got two people on the same frequency, okay, what happens is the total effect is like that, because it's the sum of the energies. And this is me being male-brained, okay? I need everything explained in logic and reason. So to me, it makes absolute sense. So we all have an obligation to keep the peace, because nobody can prove authority from creation, whatever that is to anybody, that they can knowingly cause harm. So that means that is the social contract. So stop turning a blind eye, because that is knowingly causing harm. So once things resonate as truth, that is what creates the change. It's the law of attraction that pulls people together with resonance. You can feel the energies, okay? And you'll feel a different energy by the time we leave today, okay? And that's how creation occurs. That's how we make reality. Thoughts, everything's in the universe. Nothing's new what I'm telling you. It's all here. We all know it. Okay? Have you heard of the monkey effect or whatever it is? They did experiments. What they did with the experiments was they took a bunch of monkeys from the same troop and put some on isolated islands where they could not see or speak or anything together. Within hours, on every single island, they all worked out how to crack coconuts open using the same methods. How is that possible? Once thought is there, it's in the universe. And when you can start to resonate with it, that there is how everything happens. The telescope, invented in Venice and Holland within a matter of days. Microscope. All of these things. Okay? It goes into universe, your thoughts. You put out the energy. And that there will come back, karma. You put out negativity, you will draw negativity into your life. Put out positivity, you will create positive change. You've all heard about affirmations? Yeah? And people sit down and say, I'm going to become a millionaire, I'm going to become a millionaire, I'm going to become a millionaire. This is how affirmations work. Okay? You put out, that then becomes your subconscious behavior. And when it's your subconscious behavior, then all of a sudden you are working in a different mode of exception. How did you learn to walk? You learned to walk by observation. You saw your parents, you eventually learned to roll around, and then they held your fingers, and then you're like, ooh, okay? And then all of a sudden it clicked, subconscious. Do you think how you walk? Do you think how you drive a car? How many left turns did you make on your way here today? You don't know. It's your subconscious, and that works then on exceptions. Okay? So, basically, hopefully I've just shown you a few things which, you know, I hope resonate as truth. And what I've done is, like I say, taken what resonates with me and turned that into the Peacekeeper course. And it's designed in my logic, my reason. Okay? Now, everybody has a different way of learning. I don't know all the answers. I'm not the greatest explainer. I mean, after all, I'm German. There's a guy called Lance. Those of you that haven't seen it, okay, in the light. Lance has taken what I'm doing and putting it in a different language, in different words, explaining the same concepts. Okay? So it's all about spreading it out. So what I want to do is just quickly walk you through the website to show you what's on there. And then I don't know what time's like. We can talk about specific subject, topical things. Okay? And with that then, literally open it up so that I'm here for you. And so make use of me. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, just with hindsight, what would be the best way of approaching it if firms from around the people take rejection and
Sorry, what?
What would be the best approach with your way of doing it? If a firm,
Okay, if somebody's trying to say you need a jab, yeah, okay, cool, we'll talk about that. Anything else? Central banking?
Yeah, central bank with digital currency.
Okay, cool, we'll talk about that. All right, I think that's, and then we'll just see how we get on after that. Okay, so basically, the website, okay, I just want to walk you through because there's a lot of information on there. So it's really, like I say, about learning your rights and learning how to enforce them in a non-violent way. Now, do bullies give up their ill-gotten gains easily, voluntarily? Okay? So what is different? Okay, we've been through bloody revolutions. We've been through silent revolutions, or attempts of it, you know. What is different this time is with knowledge, we're doing one simple thing. We're reflecting back the existing energy upon its source. And because it's not based in truth, that will destroy itself. No empire has survived. They all die from their own internal arrogance. And today is no different. So it's about learning our rights, where do they come from, and questioning whether they are actually true or not. And most people won't like me saying this, but guess what? The system is very equitable, very fair and just. Okay? A lot of legislation is very equitable. But it's about learning how we get this all back to foundations. Central banking, and what was the other one?
Digital ID.
Digital ID. Same solution. Real simple stuff, this. So basically, the website, okay, that's Roy, he's not here today. It's based around, the concept is education or knowledge. So it starts off with this is the home page, basically goes through whatever, rights, keeping the peace, more or less what was spoken to. Now, equity, okay, have people heard of the term equity? Outside of how much equity do I own in my house? Okay. So equity, like I say, is very simple. Honour, good faith, clean hands. Every single thing boils down to that. So in equity, Brian's put together a few nice little things on it. Now, what most people aren't aware of, okay, is that equity is the highest rules enforceable in this country. Did you know that? Equity supersedes everything. So why do we want to live in common law or anything else? Let's just live in equity. Not waste our time with this other rubbish. But it has a place. So our mission is basically to educate. I'm not sure what Brian's put down with videos. But what you need to do is just... hang on, what's this? Okay, latest videos. We've got a YouTube channel. Try and keep people up to date. And we've got a section on notices, because really that pulls together everything. It's all about notices, putting people with knowledge, gathering your evidence, and creating your record. I'll talk about the voluntary association later, because Dijon also is very involved in that. Since we started this, over the last 2-3 weeks, there's been an explosion on alternative media about constitutional stuff. Okay? Everybody's on it now. And really, I wanted to show you a few little things to show you that nobody can tell you what to do. The government has zero power, lawful power over you, and the whole system is simply your belief system, and they have the monopoly on the use of violence. That's it. That's all they got. So once you lose the fear, that there changes the whole ball game. So I will talk a bit about the Constitution, because that's very topical and a very hot thing now. In the No Council, we started the knock-knock, prove my obligation, council tax withholding. And I want to explain again there so that people understand how thoughts get expressed and then manifested, because things are moving very fast there now. So basically, you simply just enroll. That there opens then your courses, and let me just log in. The courses, right, start with, there's some different courses, okay, but on mine I've got access to even the old courses which aren't available anymore, they've been restructured, okay. But basically, the courses start with the fundamentals. So we need to build on a solid foundation. Then it goes on to know yourself. If you don't know your power, where your rights are, how they are protected, okay, then you're just not going to get anywhere. So it's about sorting out this thing. People go into, say, into courts, I stand under the common law, I'm the living man, I'm the living woman, I'm this, I'm that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, guess what you're doing? You're really making yourself look like an absolute idiot, and you're pissing them off. And you really think that you're going to get a fair judgment in that. You're not. A 5-year-old can see if you're a living man or if you're a living woman. Okay, you're insulting the judge's intelligence when you make statements like that. You know, when you take your birth certificate, oh, here's the person. You know, it just does not work. There's no evidence at all that it works. There's lots of claims that are going out on the internet, common law victory. Okay, guess what? Just listen to what's going on there. Because the judge stands up and walks out. He does. Before, say, I'm adjourning. No victory in that, mate. It's just the judge cannot lose his temper and say, look, you stupid, naughty child. Okay, stop being so bloody stupid and think that I'm an idiot, that I can't see you're a man or a woman. Okay, and he cannot lose his temper because, my God, that's unprofessional. That would make the news. So to control their temper, when they can't take any more of this nonsense, they adjourn and retire and come back again when they've calmed down and had a cup of coffee. It's no victory for anybody. Okay? So you really need to know these sort of things, because equity is about substance. What is the substance? Why do you believe that you can steal my money through taxes? That's the substance. It's not whether you're a piece of paper or whether you're a man or you're a woman. We need to address the core issues, the fundamental issues. You know, do you have a right to force a in me? Do you have a right to take my private, details for digital ID? Okay, these are the fundamental issues we're talking about here. Do I have a right to protest? Do I have a right to justice? Not whether I'm a piece of paper or a man or a woman. So we need to understand our power and our rights. And quite simply, all equal under the law. What does that mean? What one can do, all can do. Simple. Anybody comes up to you, makes a demand of you, simply ask, oh, can I go up to them and ask them to do the same? If the answer is no, it's not lawful. Okay? And we all, nobody's above the law. What that means is there is no such thing as immunity for harm you knowingly cause. If you do a wrong, you must provide a remedy. So it's really fundamental stuff. And it's really that simple. The problem is, how do you stand on it? How do we start to get enforcement of it? Okay? And again, that's where the knowledge comes in. And I'll talk about what's happened with the council tax as to explain so you can see how this stuff is being implemented. But once you know yourself, and the next thing is, how can I best defend myself? Now, when I wrote this, it was really about protests and interactions with police, because the way the police were behaving is atrocious. But based upon this, in Chester, we're hoping within the next 3 months to bring the first criminal prosecutions against police, bailiffs, and things like that. Then it's about starting to help others. Remember, turning a blind eye is knowingly causing harm. So what we're teaching is, you need to look after yourself first, the self. Know thyself. What are my limitations? Okay, we used to have a dive school and we used to teach diving, and the example we used for this, if there's somebody in desperate help in a freezing river, are you going to jump in and go and save them even though you've done your lifeguard training? It may not be your best option. Because if you jump in there in cold water, it's very dangerous, and within minutes, now there can be 2 victims, and you've created a bigger problem for somebody else. So maybe the best option is not to take direct action, but to get assistance. And if you don't have the knowledge, then get the knowledge to help. So that's the fundamental structure of how it works. Teaching about self, how you can start to see that you can actually enforce the rights. Now, what we fundamentally teach is, remember the rule of 3s. You always want 2 witnesses. So whenever there's an interaction, one person is interacting with the bully, with a camera in their hand and in their face, and the 2 witnesses are out of danger, but that person knows that there's 2 witnesses there and they've got cameras as well. So they change their behavior. Okay? And it's very noticeable, the difference in behavior. And with this in Chester, basically it was a repossession where it was becoming an embarrassment for the police and the bailiffs. They actually brought armed police, 20 armed police, to remove the 4 tenants, totally unlawfully. And we've got all the evidence. Yeah. And last week we actually got an injunction to to stay the possession order on another property. So we're starting to learn our way around all of this. So from that, then I've got the put in the court the dispute resolution. Okay, I've explained already roughly the 3 notices. That goes into depth. Everything's merely a claim, a belief. Okay, and legislation is nothing more than that. It's a belief. It's a claim. Okay, it's how it goes through the courts. That's where law is created. Government creates no law. They can't. They have no power. If I can't create a law, they can't. That's how simple it is. And so this goes through really, and that is important because when we're going to court, and this is what's different with what's happening now and what we do. Okay, everybody else says, oh, you're going into their den or whatever, and their private things, and all of this stuff. Utter rubbish. Okay, and we can explore more than that depending on time. But you must have evidence to either defend yourself or be able to bring a claim, and that's what the 3 notices are about. Then we've just brought out the court auditor course last year, and that there is really to give people an understanding of how public dispute resolution should work, okay? And that allows you then, with the record you've prepared, to go into the courts to get public dispute resolution. So that's the courses. And then what we've got is BVA, by voluntary association, and Bijan will talk a bit about it. But what we're trying to do here, just to try and show you, so you get some idea, it's a decentralized way of people to connect. It's purely directed at the common issue is the rule of law. To reach a common understanding of what that means and to make an agreement with one another that that's how we'll behave, i.e. we voluntarily contract ourselves to act in honour, which means my word is my bond, in good faith, which means I don't put my self-interest above that of anybody else, and with clean hands I do everything openly, honestly and transparently, i.e. we get a contract between us that when we interact, this is what we can expect. So it's a population-based model, because religion and nationalism are the 2 biggest killers known to mankind, so it's time we stopped using that nonsense. So that basically is how the globe breaks down. So for instance, Asia being the biggest continent, they've got 2, 4, 6 facilitators, so basically Asia's got roughly half the global population. Then if we just look at Europe, so it breaks it down then into countries. Europe has got 1 facilitator, and I've only broken down Europe, but there's Europe broken down. So what we've got is, inside Europe we've got 10 subgroups, again based on population. So the UK is broken down, basically England and Wales, it's roughly 60 million people that have a country equivalent. So Scotland, Ireland, Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Benelux is a separate group. France and Germany both have a comparable population to UK, so they've got their own groups. But basically that then is how Europe's broken down. So if we go to England, you've got England, 57 million, Wales, 3.2, Channel Islands, Ireland and Faroe Islands, and a few from southern Scotland to make up to 61 million, which is roughly what the groups are broken down to. So then if we go down to England and the United Kingdom, basically it's based on postcodes because you can get postcode data. So there's, in England and Wales, basically we've got North East, North West, East Midlands, West Midlands, Wales, South East, Inner London, South West is the next breakdown, again based on numbers. And then within each of those, we've got a facilitator, admin, whatever you want to call it. It's purely a contact point to put people in the right groups. Our main group, we've got over 2,000 people in. It's basically become useless and non-productive. So yeah, great having lots of numbers, but if it's useless, it's time to change the model. And so far, about 10% of the people have moved into the new structure. And since we've moved it into the new structure, we've got, and this was around about just before Christmas, Kate, we did it? I think around about just before Christmas. So basically, if you live in Scotland, there's the link. Go and speak to Debbie. If you're in any of these postcodes, it's broken down by postcodes. Okay, so you can go through, so what are you guys here? Gloucester, GL, is it? So I guess that's in the southwest. Yeah, there you are. Okay, so you've got to get hold of Claire. Just click on Love Sunshine. Okay, and she can put you into that group. And once you're in your postcode group, because we haven't got the numbers yet, the discussion is at the regional level. And then you join the EU2 group, which is England. And then you also join the Europe continental level and the global level. The top levels are read-only, where you comment and discuss at the bottom, and the facilitators post relevant comments to the articles, so that you can actually start to filter useless information from just repost. Also, it allows regional people to get together. So in Scotland, they've on their second meeting. Northeast, they've got they've had one meeting, and they've had 2 more localized meetings. People are now starting to actually action. That's what I'm interested in. Talkers, we've got plenty. Okay, plenty talkers. But the change is massive. And so they are starting to join together. Now, this is different from community assemblies. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of some of the community assemblies that are coming up. Community assembly is a project-based idea. This here is about the rule of law as the foundation of every single interaction. So if we go into a project, we all know this is the basic rules of how we will behave with one another in order to achieve that objective. So they're totally separate. This is foundational rule of law about peace. Yeah?
And Mark, is this the idea? We do the course online first, and then we would then make a connection with Claire afterwards?
Right, ideally, and this is where it will end up. Okay, until we've got the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, there's no fixed ideas. The concept is, you literally, I agree with the fundamental principles, and they outlined a very simple constitution, if that's what you want to call it. Honour, good faith, clean hands, essentially. But once the numbers grow, what will happen is only 10% of people will be active. The other 90% you don't have to waste your time with them. Actually, we're getting 20%, which is better, but that's already because it's focused. Okay. So, but even within that focus group, I would normally just expect 10%. But it's, like I said, I'm happy it's more than that. And so it's about getting people connected, because this is a whole new concept. But once it gets populated, okay, then to become an administrator, because you are the role model, you need the in-depth knowledge. You won't become an administrator unless you've done, the courses. But again, it's up to people what they want. It's not up to me to say what you do. We all have free will. Okay? It's just, it makes rational sense before you become an administrator that you understand what you're going to be administering. Okay? Sort of thing. So, and then the idea is, as the groups grow, they will then, so at the moment the discussion's at the regional level, so the Southwest, you'll be in the Southwest group, you'll also be in the postcode group. And once the numbers are sufficient, basically the discussion will move down. The idea is that the general discussion is at the grassroots level, and that there is where you talk about local issues. At the regional level, regional issues are put in. At the England level, they're put in, so that you have a read-only, whatever level interests you. Okay? So the idea is actually to filter information and put out relevant information to the relevant places. Okay? And that ties in with the core auditor course, because in essence, what happens is in your regional group, you post when you have a hearing, and then other people in the area, they will be able to come to your assistance. That is basically what's on there, on the website. So this is in the Get Involved then. The Get Involved basically outlines the posting guidelines, which is basically respect other people's viewpoints, no swearing, stuff like that, and try and keep it relevant. So the Get Involved basically has got all the contacts. What I showed you there was the voluntary association. The voluntary association goes through the theory and structure of the groups. It's a global model. One of the problems that nobody's addressed is how do we actually have a model where anybody anywhere on the planet can come in to a common purpose. And when I say common purpose, the rule of law, not common purposes, other people. There are no topics. Everything is evidence-based. So if you come up with straw man stuff, unless you can show that it's of benefit to people, it gets deleted. There are plenty of other groups you can talk about your ideas or theories or this SDK, V-Trust or this or that. Okay? Nobody has shown me any evidence that any of that works. And also, I'm not dealing at the minute with utilities. Council tax is just a straight head-on government. We're taking you on in your own game. Okay? So this shows then basically the coding on a global scale, and then we've got the structure here, and as people come in, we'll expand it. So Saz has just come in from Australia. I don't know if you know or you've heard this girl that won a massive trespass case in the Supreme Court as litigant in person. She's going to be running the Australasia sort of groups. And this thing is just starting to grow. And it's about results. Okay? So that's just to give you some idea of what's on there. All right. Okay. What was your topic? Mandatory injunctions? Digital ID. Anybody else got any issues or problems? Yeah, no. I was just going to say.
And just push back on the 15-minute city.
Hmm?
Push back on the
15-minute city. Right, your solution's already in there for all of those, including council tax, including any tax, including anything the government wants to tell you. It's all there. Just work your way through the course. The answers are there.
Same thing with central bank digital currency.
Every single thing where anybody wants to impose their will on you, the answers are in there. Okay, shall we have a pee break? And then we'll actually talk about why the answers are in there. Okay? Okay, we'll go through and I'll explain why. Look, Road to Kill the Bill. He's the one that single-handedly stopped pigpen protesting. And I'll explain to you legislation, law, and we can talk about that, but I want to just first get a few concepts across here. Common law is actually common law precedent. Okay? Now, what that means is the only difference between the Roman civil jurisdiction and the common law jurisdiction is under the common law jurisdiction, judges are bound, i.e. they have an obligation to follow existing high court decisions unless they are not equitable, i.e. you argue lawful excuse from a bad common law precedent under the rules of equity. It's not the law of equity, they're rules, okay? So where there's a bad judgment, if it doesn't feel right, if it's not fair and just, your answer lies in the rules of equity. So how is law created? Legislation's a claim, nothing more than that. It's an equitable claim. I explained to you how they came up and said, under the legislation, Trade Union Act, or under this legislation. It's a claim. If you don't rebut it through the 3 notices, okay, then you've got no chance of enforcement through the courts. Now, what happened, this was in, Blackpool. Was it Blackpool case? Yeah. So basically in Blackpool, what happened was the fracking company set up an attempt to make a precedent that protesting can only be in pig pens. Basically, what they did was they had a 4-person related to George Soros and the bunch that I've said, and this is the way that it works. Okay, if you say this in court, this is what I'll pay you, and just sign this non-disclosure agreement that you will never disclose this agreement. So they go then with this application, knowing that they've got somebody paid off. Then, in the court, when this happened, Joe heard about it, and he went and said, no, this is not fair and just. What they were trying to do is basically say, here's the field, we're fracking over here, here's the main road, and what you can do is, here's a big hedge, we'll build you a little pig pen here, and you guys can put up all the signs you want, and scream and shout and everything. What's the bloody point of a pig pen inside a field where nobody can see it anyway? Okay? So he went to the court, and the woman who was the paid shrill basically demolished her. Had he not gone, that there would have been the law. That's how law is created. Somebody brings a claim, and if it's not challenged, nobody stands on their rights, they end up with the default judgment. He who asks gets. That's the way it works. So what we've got is a system where, guess what? We've got a bunch of incompetent, ignorant legal professionals who we've trusted are operating in our best interest. So what are the obligations of the legal officers? A legal officer, okay, is a solicitor, a barrister, King's Counsel, and in the magistrates' courts, the officer of the court. Used to be the clerk, now they call it a legal officer. Their obligations are to the rule of law, to the constitutional principle of the rule of law, to the court. Their obligations to the court include putting the court with all relevant law in favour and in dissent of their client's position. And then comes their client. Their obligations to you as a litigant in person are to use plain English. If you don't understand what's going on in there, you just simply say, can you talk proper English? O-level English. No legalese. It has no standing in the court. They cannot use make any threats, intimidation. Okay? They cannot claim anything they have no right to claim, and they cannot create a dispute where none exists. Now, wouldn't it be nice if they just did that? Okay? So, you have a prosecution and a defense. And their argument is, hey man, come on guys, we started off with the sword fights and the pistols, and now we just have pieces of paper. What I've read to you, or said, this is an obligation of every officer of the court. So my God, it should be really simple. One party in a dispute goes to a solicitor. That solicitor should provide all the relevant law in favour of both people's arguments. Then you can assess your position in law and make your decision. How? They wouldn't make any money, would they? Because over 90% of the stuff would stop there and then. They have a conflict of interest. We want dispute resolution. They will kill their income. So, we go to court. Two parties go to court. One party says this is the law from a legal professional, legally trained, 7 years or whatever, plus all their experience. The other party goes somewhere else and they tell you something different. So we've got two legal professionals who can't even agree what the law is. Then, before you get to court, they say, oh, we've got to get a barrister's opinion. Sorry, Mr. Solicitor, you don't know what's the law? You're asking somebody else for an opinion? So now we've got 4 opinions, 2 barristers and 2 solicitors, and they don't even agree on what the law is. Insane. Absolutely insane. Okay? The reason is, jack of all trades, master of none, is better than master of one. All these guys are simply in a box. Little specialisms. Little specialisms. Divorce lawyer, property lawyer, trust lawyer, this lawyer, that lawyer, all these different specialties. But nobody understands the foundations upon that specialty. And that's the rules of equity. Okay? Equity will not suffer wrong without a remedy. Whether you want to call the wrong a breach of contract, or physical harm, or theft, or fraud, or whatever, it makes no difference. Plain English, harm, describe it in your own words. Okay? Because equity is substance over form. So I just want to show you, so this is the book that Joe wrote, which I was talking about earlier. Somebody asked for it. He actually names the names of George Soros' bunch in there. And they've not sued him, because they can't. Because it's truth. Right, legislation.gov. This here is where you get all current statute law. What is statute law? Statute law is exactly that, statute law. It's a specific type of law. Okay? And I'll show you, I just want to show you the basis of this whole thing and why it's utter bollocks that they can tell you what to do by their own rules. So we've told common law precedence is one thing, and that's created in the court following the resolution of a dispute in public. So that's why it's public law. So here's something called, when I brought out my first version, it was nice and easy, but then they had to make it more complicated and change the links so that my links don't work anymore. These guys are following what we're doing. And I'll show you many examples of this, if you want. Okay, there's something here called finding your way around legislation, understanding legislation. So if we just go into understanding legislation, okay, what it does is, now let me just control this.
So what website is this on?
Legislation.gov.uk. Okay. So this is their website. Okay. So this is what I mean about we need to start looking at evidence. Okay. So what they're saying is primary legislation is the term used to describe the main laws passed by the legislative body in the UK, which is Parliament, Acts of the Scottish Parliament, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's the first thing you note there? words do make a difference. Legislation, law. Is it law, isn't it? Okay? So when I helped Sue in her fine for being more than 5 miles, we had the, we're challenging everything, all right? Basically, we're challenging the Bar Association. We put in power of attorneys, and they sidestepped that through granting us Mackenzie Friend. And in 3 criminal cases, I've actually been granted rights of audience as a Mackenzie Friend. So we're challenging everything. So we asked the copper. Okay. Basically, quite rightly, I've told you what the legal professionals should do. If they bloody well did that, we could have faith knowing that they are upholding the rule of law. So it makes sense for society as a whole to grant a privilege to specialize in that so we don't all have to learn about it. So it's rational. However, who's policing them? Nobody. Okay? That's us not taking responsibility for the delegation. We are the problem, not them. And a Mackenzie Friend is basically somebody that is not legally qualified or certified to practice law. Okay? So, but
you know anything about like a lawyer or something?
yeah, basically, a Mackenzie Friend basically normally will be that all you can do is whisper to them, okay, and they speak. But like I say, we're working our way around this through powers of attorney and putting them in a corner. Problem is, if we get idiots who come arguing freemen of the land crap and stuff like that, that's a total waste of time.
Can't the Mackenzie Friend cross-question?
Very rarely will they allow them even to speak, and even rarer that you can cross-examine witnesses. This is, I don't know of anybody else as a Mackenzie Friend that's been granted not only the right to speak, but to cross-examine. Okay, so we're making steps in that. Okay?
But the power of attorney is just the way that some power of attorney.
No, what I'm saying is, if I want you to speak on my behalf, okay, I authorize you in this case to speak on my behalf. Very clear, specific. Yeah, when you hire a solicitor, you sign a power of attorney. Same thing.
I may be wrong, but I believe the president of Mackenzie was a man called Mackenzie who first established this.
Correct.
And I believe that I may be wrong, that he did cross-question.
It may well be, okay, but basically,
So that he could ask, cross-questioning is so that you can, it gives you the ability to question the defence, but also to question your own party, so that their stories can come out. Whereas if you don't have someone to cross-question you,
yeah,
you can't give your own.
yeah, but basically what they're saying is, okay, you've got to come to one of our people, i.e. we're tying one hand behind your back.
Yeah.
We're saying you can only use these people if you want to defend yourself.
Yeah, I had a Mackenzie Friend, and the judge wouldn't even let them whisper.
Yeah, honestly, it's ridiculous, some of it.
Piece of paper.
Very,
They were told
but
off.
now that they're learning that we actually are doing this with knowledge, they see the threat.
Yeah.
Okay, they really are threatened with it. But, okay, so there we've got one example of obfuscation, law, legislation. And guess what? What did they create in Parliament? Acts. So we've got acts, legislation, law. So what the hell's going on here? Okay? So, whoops, okay, that's a fly, that's not my mouse. So, basically, okay, so here it goes on to talk about bylaws. All right? Then it talks about case law. So we're getting lots of different meanings of the word. But basically to explain to you what's going on here, Parliament is the board of directors. They create general policy directions, i.e. this is what we want in generalities. They don't micromanage, they macromanage. They then delegate authority to the ministers to fill in the details. Okay? So it's no different from a company, okay, we want to make McDonald's burgers. Okay, and we want vegetarian burgers. And then they authorize the managers to sort out the details. That's all it is. So primary legislation creates the authority of secondary legislation. and they call it acts, or laws, or legislation, or whatever the hell they like. Guess why? Because they don't know the difference. Ignorance is the true problem we face. So let's just continue looking down here. Okay, so bylaws is delegated, i.e. authorised by primary legislation to local authorities, transport, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's clear. It's just a different form of secondary legislation. Then it goes down here, case law. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Case law. Common law precedents. And it tells you, case law is a set of rulings from court judgments that set precedents for how the law has been interpreted and applied in certain cases. Case law is not held on legislation.gov. Some case law can be found at blah. So they're telling you, if you want law, don't waste your time looking at legislation. So what makes them think legislation is law?
Mark, is it right that legislation is from Parliament, but law is actually from the judges?
Correct,
so
from courts.
Legislation and acts are not actually legal. It's not law.
No, it's legal. Okay, this is a different... okay, I use the word legal.
Police, you know,
Yeah.
about something else.
Yeah. Basically, I distinguish the two.
Yeah.
Legal is anything with legislative authority.
Okay.
Okay? It does not mean it's lawful.
Right.
Okay? There's a difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? The law is where we test it in the courts, any claim. So legislation is merely a claim, and when that's argued in court, it becomes common law precedent. Okay?
Yes,
That's how law is created.
Exactly. I know there's a statement no law facts can be tried in court, but legislation can be, but a law can't. Is that right?
No, the law is about facts.
Yeah. But if the law's already been set, you know, say the
Coronavirus Act, anything.
Yeah.
It's not law.
Right.
It's a claim.
Right.
It's an equitable claim.
Right.
Okay, and this is what people need to understand. Everything is equity. What they're saying is, we believe we have the right, the lawful right, because they're only human beings like you and me, to make this claim that blah, 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 blah. If you speed, I can do this, or whatever. It's a claim. Now, if we do not defend in the first instance that claim in equity, whether it's that it's unlawful, then that's a bad common law precedent. That means we need to argue at a higher court to overturn that precedent unless we can show that it's not equitable. And these are things that we're challenging the courts with. All right? So,
Can I just ask something? Is there a sort of, I've discovered later in the day that some of the things I didn't about or address,
yeah.
I could have done.
Yeah.
And I've then heard about time of knowledge. But I don't know what the time span would be for rebutting something or learning about
Equity
something.
knows no time.
Really?
If you're without the knowledge, nothing you can do about
So
it.
you can use
Once
that.
you come into the knowledge
Yeah.
to find remedy for a wrong,
Right,
you go to court and get your remedy.
right,
Equity knows no time.
great. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
Equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy.
Right,
If you don't have the knowledge today, you can't do anything about it.
we learn it later.
Yeah.
We address it.
Can I just rewind? What's rights of audience?
Rights of audience is being allowed to be heard in a court, i.e. that they can listen, that they can incorporate what is said into their evidence for decision making.
So this is before the bar, before the case starts. This is
In the court.
and before the case bar starts.
Okay, right. Let me just show you this here, the Senior Courts Act, Section 49. Okay, because what I want to show you is by their own admission, equity is supreme. Okay? This is not my opinion, and this is the other thing. In the manual, everything's referenced to links to source so you can satisfy yourself as to the validity of what I'm saying. And every page has comments. And if there's something wrong on the website, it's up to you guys to point it out so that we can put out the best available information for people. That's what we need, the best information, and we need to share it. So what it says here, Section 49, law and equity. Now what happened was in 1615, people, have you heard of the Chancery Courts?
Yes.
And you heard of the Courts of Common Pleas or Common Law Courts? Okay, basically, the Chancery Courts were you pled to the king's conscience when you felt there was an injustice, i.e. equity, conscience. Then the common law courts were where, common law essentially is all about property claims, contract. So if there was a bad contract and you felt justice wasn't deserved, you pled then into the chancery to get the king to override the existing bad common law precedents. Okay? So therefore you argue lawful excuse from an existing common law precedence under the rules of equity that is not fair and just. And so in 1615, what happened was essentially most equity is the result of inheritance where kiddies are arguing it's not fair and just. So the rich kids basically were in the chancery fighting over their inheritances. But one got, the Earl of Oxford case 1615, one kid got a common law judgment saying you've won, and one had a chancery judgment saying you've won. So there was a conflict. So the king at the time decided that in the event of a conflict between the rules of equity and the common law, the rules of equity prevail. Conscience is above the form of law. Obvious. Rational. Okay, and that's confirmed by Parliament themselves in section 49. Subject to the provision of this act or any other act, every court exercising jurisdiction in England and Wales in any civil cause or matter shall continue to administer the law, law and equity on the basis that wherever there is a conflict or variance between the rules of equity and the rules of the common law with reference to the same matter, the rules of equity will prevail. So this isn't Marc telling you. Okay, this is Parliament saying in every court in England and Wales, equity is it. That's where we need to stand. And that's what we need to do, is force the court or move the court to uphold the law. The law was expressed in the Earl of Oxford case. That set the precedent. The problem is, this is the Senior Courts Act. The senior courts are Crown Court, High Court and Appeal Court. So what they've done is partially legislatively codified the common law. So I can't use this in the magistrates court or the county court. In the County Court Act, they've legislated this. So I only can't use those two acts in the magistrates court. So how do I move the court to do the right thing? I use the Earl of Oxford case, because that covers every single court. Whereas legislatively, they made it a legal obligation of all the courts except the magistrates court. I wonder why. Okay, so do you see the difference between law and legislation? Okay, so legally, in all the courts except for the magistrates court, they have to follow equity. However, lawfully, the magistrates also do, not legally. It's a lawful obligation from the Earl of Oxford, common law precedent.
And the county. And the county court.
No, County Court, it's in the County Courts Act. It's just not in the Senior Courts Act. It's in a different act. Yeah. Senior Courts Act, 1981. All of this stuff is in the manuals. Free download, just download the thing.
Equity applies to county court.
Everything. Yeah, everything. Okay. So, what I'm showing you is, hopefully now you can see why we're so confused. Because they don't even know what's the difference between legislation, law, acts, case law. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. Okay? So, just to jump forward, okay, the Act of Settlement 1700 defines the word law. Parliament has defined what law is. Okay, the Act of Settlement 1700 defines law as your birthright. So the question is then, okay, what is your birthright? Your birthright is that everybody follows a duty of care not to knowingly cause you harm. It's expressed, and that is sort of expressed in the health and safety regulations, and that is the basis of Karen's appeal in Scotland, where the NHS Lothian sacked her for not wearing a mask properly at all times, and our argument was the Supreme Court in 2015 ruled that anybody giving medical advice before acting must provide informed consent. And it defined what informed consent was. So our argument was very simple, They made a risk assessment, and they have not met the lawful requirements of informed consent as set out in Montgomery versus Montgomery in 2015. Therefore, the dismissal is unfair. So in a 30-odd page judgment, he ruled against Karen, which we appealed. The appeal, then we said, hey mate, you're wrong. We appealed the rejection of the permission to appeal. We had a 2-hour sitting where I was cross-examined, because in the tribunals you don't need to use a legal representative, and Karen granted me to represent her. For 2 hours I was cross-examined by Lord Stewart, and he agreed that we had lawful excuse, we had the right to appeal. Now what he did was, he overturned his boss's decision. His boss said no. Okay? So I know that we've won that case, because he would not have given us the permission and go against his boss unless he knew. He needed to satisfy himself that I could argue this case and win. I've got a reasonable chance of winning. Okay? So that's in the Employment Appeal Tribunal, based upon the rule of law, the principle of law of informed consent, which stems out of every person's duty of care. That's it. That's the case. They failed to uphold their duty of care to the employee. Okay? So that's one case that's been going on for nearly over a year and a half. Cases take a long time. So we just got a few, well, at the beginning of this week, we actually got the written confirmation of the permission that we've overturned the last one. And what we've got going about is a parents who split up, where the father wants the kids to the mother doesn't. So the High Court judge ruled based upon an appeal court judgment, saying we bound to follow the higher judgment, and Montgomery does not apply, because we just basically, my opinion is it doesn't apply. Okay? No, I'm not kidding you. This is the way these guys work. Okay? Another 30-odd page judgment. The point is really simple. Does the information put out by government meet the lawful obligations as set out in Montgomery versus Lanarkshire 2015? And it doesn't. It's a simple judgment. What you need to do is, everything needs to be rational, and in order to determine whether you want to take any medical treatment or do anything in life, guess what you do? A risk-benefit analysis. What are the risks, the consequences of me doing an action? What are the consequences of me not doing an action? And then you weigh it up. Okay? So, if you want to take a COVID, yeah?
Could you just, it's Montgomery v. who?
Lanarkshire. Lanarkshire.
Lanarkshire.
All of this stuff is in the manuals. Just download the manual, all of the stuff's there. Okay, so basically what they're supposed to provide is the risks of the medication. So with the, do you know what the risks are? Of serious heart condition, myocarditis or pericarditis, and this is from their own leaflets, 1 in 10,000. Okay, per jab. You take your first jab, 1 in 10,000. You take a second one, now it's down 1 in 5,000. You take the third one, that's 1 in 2,500. Fourth one, 1 in 1,250. Okay, and you wonder why we're getting all of this? Okay, so what are the risks of if I get getting myocarditis? I have no idea. I can't find this information. Okay, what are the risks though? Even if I don't get, we need to lay all of this out. That's what Montgomery says. Why? Without that, we cannot make an informed decision. So we appealed the judgment, and the judge knew we were going to appeal. This happened just before Christmas. And the judge, on her own volition, made an order saying that she'll set aside the enforcement of the order, allowing the father to go ahead and get these pending and granted permission that we don't have to get her approval to go to appeal, and allowed us to go directly to the Court of Appeal. So fortunately, SJ really has done a huge amount of research, and she spent like 2 months going through the Peacekeeper course, and she gets it. But her kids are at risk. She had very strong motivation for this. So luckily, she saw that the judge in the appeal court, Right Honourable Lady Justice King, was the one who made the other judgment which the High Court relied on. Now that's a bit of a conflict of interest. Just a tad. Okay? Me overruling an appeal based upon my own judgment. You can't question it. Okay? So I put in a second appeal. Now most people don't know this is possible. Okay? You just got to read the rules. It tells you what you can do and can't do. But what does it tell you? If I've got an injustice, there must be a path to remedy. The second appeal. What do though? They try and discourage you from this. So that got rejected within a day by some clerk saying you can't appeal it. So that happened on Monday, I think it was. So Tuesday morning I put in the second appeal saying, who the hell are you? I want to know the name of the person who did this and under what authority, because their actions are illegal. Further, because this is such a controversial matter, I need a court order that whoever is going to make this decision is not, because that there already shows prejudice. So yesterday we got back a letter from a master. Now, those of you that don't know what a master is, they're a very senior judge. I can't remember his name. Basically saying we can't deal with this matter as I'm not a party to the case. Hey, but we got a reply from the master. We've had an impact. Yeah. So all I did was forwarded it to Sarah, who changed Marc into Sarah, and sent it back again. How pathetic, okay? With such a serious matter. All right? So hopefully you can see from those two examples that we don't need to know. Do you know the civil procedure rules is about that much? It's about 7,000 pages of small print. Okay? You don't need 99.99% of it is rubbish. Fundamentals, evidence, rules of evidence, setting aside orders. There are very few things about fair and just. All the rest is just detail, which is irrelevant. If you want to go down those rabbit holes, go down those rabbit holes. You're wasting your time. Stick with the basic principles, the instinct, what your feelings are telling you. Is this right or is this wrong? Okay? This question which came up there earlier, guess what? If you would have looked in the regulations, it told you it's an experimental, and therefore you just say, fuck it, I'm not interested in this experiment, thank you very much. And you would have still had your job. And there's nothing they could have done about it. Simple. What's the problem? Okay? So you'll find in every piece of legislation there's a cop-out clause. Every single piece of legislation, like I've just pointed out to you today. Okay? The cop-out clause is because equity prevails over everything. Okay? When they started with this stuff, I was in Kuwait. I was due to fly back on the 14th. On the 12th of March 2020, they locked the country down. When I say lock the country down, okay, you get a lot of males, bachelors, who come and work in labour, and they put in male-only areas. These areas are quite big, and when I say quite big, like 2 or 3 kilometres by 2 or 3 kilometres, and there's 2 of these areas. Overnight, they were barricaded and razor-wired. Overnight. Okay? People had to throw food over this to feed the people inside. I looked at this stuff, I looked at the data, I used to do cycle analysis, and guess what? Everything in nature follows a natural distribution curve. Absolutely everything. 10%, 10%, 80%. Doesn't matter what you look at. An infection goes in exactly the same pattern. Okay? I looked at the data from China, which was available at the time, South Korea. So this is 12th of March 2020, and the Diamond Princess data, and it's like, what the fuck? It's over. What's the problem? Okay? those of you that don't know, well, maybe you know, I don't know. Have you heard of the downgrade of from the highly contagious infectious disease register? That occurred on the 13th of March. Okay, the bill was introduced by Matt Hancock on the 19th of March. Okay, sorry, on the 16th of March. On the 19th of March, it was made public. Public were noticed that there's no problem, confirming exactly my analysis. It's over. They downgraded it. Initially, it was an unknown threat, therefore they applied the precautionary principle. If we don't know, let's tread with caution. Okay? So Matt Hancock was potentially for fraud for bringing that bill in. So did any of you follow Michael Benicio's private criminal prosecution?
Yes.
Okay, I was the silent partner. And that failed for one reason, ego. Okay? It'll come out later, but I'll leave it at that, and Michael stopped talking to me. But that there was an incredible moment. What did it say? I signed the arrest warrant on that. Okay? Each of you holds the power to change anything you like. Get it right, and you'll do it. So, I've shown you equity is supreme. Hopefully, all of this nonsense about how I write my name or what language they use, okay, it's all in the course. All of it goes back to source documents saying, it makes no difference how you write your name. It makes no difference if you want to use a thumbprint. It makes no difference if you think your birth certificate, okay? Equity is substance over form. Whether you use a thumbprint, that's form. Whether it's red, blue, pink, black, whatever, ink, form. If you put 2 dots here or 2 dots there, form. If you use big letters or small letters, form. It's irrelevant. Was your mind in control of your body which took that action? That's it. Simple. Keep it simple. Okay, so I want to just finish off with council tax. Okay, because that's a bit of a contentious subject. And every revolution has always been over unfair taxation. Basically, if the peasants feel that they're not getting their fair share, they revolt. So what's different with what we're doing with the council tax thing is, guess what? We're taking them on in equity, what's fair and just, as reflected in their own legislation and admitted in their legislation. So I wanted to show you a chain of authority. Okay, this is the Council Tax Administration and Enforcement Regulations 1992. It's secondary legislation, okay? Hence it's called regulation and not an act. So this is why they send you out and think that they can come and steal your money. So people don't look at this thing here called the introductory text. The introductory text, all of them are looking at all of those other pieces there, down all of those rabbit holes, but overlooking the obvious. Okay? Every piece of paper will tell you its authority. Okay, and it tells you here, this piece of paper that allows them to send out a bill and to do this and send you a reminder and take you to court and all of that crap comes out of where? This authority comes from, they tell you, okay, the Local Government Finance Act 1992. So this paper is worthless without that information. That's where it gets its authority from. Okay? So, let's go to the Local Government Finance Act 1992 and see where that gets its authority from. Oops, Gavin's mouse a bit better. Simple stuff, this, nothing complicated. That's what it says, introductory text. So we could go through all of these rabbit holes if you like. Look at them, loads of rabbit holes. Okay, how many rabbit holes do you want to go down? Or we can simply see where's its authority. So we go to the introductory text. So this is all their stuff, huh? It tells you everything, hidden in plain sight. Ooh, yeah, now we're getting to some claims, eh? So, be it enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty, bind with advice and consent, consent of the Lord Spiritual, the Church of England, the Lords Temporal. The old barons used to be the Lords Temporal in King John's day. Okay? And Commons, MPs, members of Parliament, as we know them, in this Parliament assembled and by authority of the state. So let's check where they get their authority from, shall we? Okay, so now here you've got to search a bit, but I'll shortcut it all right? Okay, so we go to the year 1688, because that's where it all changed. Remember we said before, that was the end of the divine right of kings. So, what happened in 1688, or what are they admitting and is still left? Ooh, Act 1, I guess, comes before Act 2, wouldn't you say? So let's go and see what Act 1 of William and Mary was. And let's open the whole thing and just have a look at it. Okay, so that's it, not very long, is it? I wonder why people don't read it. Okay, so this is an act for removing and preventing all questions and disputes concerning the assembling and sitting of this present Parliament. Cool? So, what does it say? Lord Spiritual and Temporal and Commons convened at Westminster this day. So they're telling you what they did. Okay? And so what they're saying is, are the two houses of Parliament. What they've done there is created the legal fictions of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. That's what created their authority. This is where the fictions were created. Okay? And shall be and are hereby declared, enacted and adjudged to all intents, constructions and purposes whatsoever. So they're telling you, here we've created these fictions of law, a concept, an idea, okay, called the two houses of Parliament, okay, which is in the present Parliament. Okay, so Parliament has two houses, and this is the document which created those fictions. Simple. And guess what it says? Notwithstanding other claims, basically, or any other defects or form or default whatsoever, as if they had been summoned according to the usual form. So, do you see now where by authority of the same comes from? What we've done is we've grouped ourselves together and declared we are Parliament and we have two houses. And what we're saying is, well, it used to be done like this. We have no authority, and they have been summoned. There you go. That's why Parliament has no authority. It's self-declared authority in their own legislation. No authority. They've self-declared it. Okay? You can do it. It's perfectly lawful. Now, somebody asked about assemblies or something. I don't know. Earlier somebody asked, how do we set up assemblies? There you go. That's how you do it. Okay? They'll tell you how to do it. Or was it councils? Whatever. So, yeah, just make a declaration. Okay? You have every right to. You can do what the hell you like. All equal under law, none is above law. However, this is a very fraudulent misrepresentation. What does that lead you to believe? That William and Mary had something to do with it. Have you read anything about William and Mary in that? No. This should say, our claim to govern. That would be a far better, more accurate description. Okay? So now we know what Parliament is, the House of Lords, and the Commons, and that they did it all by themselves. That's all the authority they have. So now do you see why it says in an Act of Parliament, being enacted blah blah blah, by authority of the same. That's where the authority comes from. Self-created authority. However, let's look on to the next thing, because they actually were visionaries, these guys. This here is an incredible thing that they did. They did have your best interest at heart. You laugh, I'm serious. Okay? So, whoops, need to go back on the Bill of Rights is the next act. So that was what they did first, created the fictions of law, and the second act was the Bill of Rights. Okay, now again, this is a fraudulent misrepresentation. Well, I suppose it's not quite. It's not a very accurate description. Okay, what this should say is the contract to govern. Okay, this is a contract. Okay, and remember, they claimed the authority themselves. And guess what they've done here? There were 6 lords that instigated all of this, claimed the authority to govern, and the first thing they did was say, we are here as your representatives. Okay? So they've admitted, we are the boss, the people, and they are representatives. Principal agency law. You can do nothing as the slave if your master doesn't authorize it, and the slave don't tell the master what to do. Okay? So even though they self-proclaim that authority, they have very equitably, fair and just, said, we will do what the people say. Nothing wrong with that. I commend them for this. Okay?
Where do they say that?
Lawfully, fully and freely representing all of the states of the people of this realm.
Was doing what we want and simply representing us is slightly
No, what's a representative?
Response to the
It's a
wishes.
complicated word.
Response to the wishes of the people.
No, okay. If I sign a power of attorney asking a solicitor to represent me, what am I doing? He's acting on my behalf. And in the power of attorney, I'll say what he can and can't do. I.e., I authorize, I delegate authority. I tell them what they can do. So this is a contract. What they did was first set out their gripes with the old kings. Okay, so that's their shit list. Okay. Then what they did was, they said that King James II abdicated. Okay. Now this is important. We all know in history that William's armies came across from Holland. Okay, is the story. James had no army, and when you've got an army coming this way, what do? You can run that way. Okay. So this isn't abdicating, this is self-defense. Okay? So, but in law, okay, basically what it should say is, through the law of conquest. Okay? But under common law, if you abandon your property, anybody can take it. Hence, if I lose my phone and it falls out of my pocket, it's still my property, but if I throw it in the rubbish bin, anybody can have it. Okay? But that there is a mere technicality, because why? Equity, substance over form. So what they're saying is under their ancient rights, okay, the reason for doing this is, as their ancestors in a like case would usually have done, for vindicating and asserting the ancient rights and liberties declared. Okay, you see now how to set up your communities? My human right, my natural inalienable right, I hereby declare and enact. Okay? So these here then are the articles. Now the first 2 articles are about dispensing power and late dispensing power. Okay? By regal authorities. So regal authorities, what are they? Basically, I won't get into the detail. This in the new council tax skeleton argument will go absolutely everything in it. The regal authority is basically the royal prerogative, the right to govern. It used to be the kings that governed by the divine right, or the belief of divine right. This stopped the divine right, and introduced parliament. And the contract says, King, my friend, if you want to sign this contract, as representatives of the people, you will abide by all of this. Whatever we say in Parliament, you do. So guess who's your new king? Parliament. Correct. King's got no rights other than the prerogative, and Parliament has agreed with the predecessors of the current king that the king has no power except that which Parliament grants it. So who gives a shit whether Charlie's, whatever, or whether his mummy sat on a stone or signed at the top or the bottom? Who gives a shit? It makes no difference. Because they have no power other than that what Parliament grants it. Okay? So basically, these are the terms and conditions of the offer. Okay? So this is what was claimed. Okay? They then tendered the crown regal power and limited what the crown could do. I.e., the people tell us what to do, and we tell you what to do. So there is no separation of powers between the legislature body and the executive. The executive is subject of the legislature, as opposed to this nonsense they tell you about the separation of powers. Okay? So what happened, though, is, remember, it started off as the subject rights and the representative of the estates. It was accepted for all the people. So this is a contract, a tripartite contract, of which the living people at the time were agents, principals of Parliament, who were principals of execution of their will. However, they're all dead. We do not have a contract in place, you and me. Therefore, they are trustees, because they are acting in a representative capacity, as admitted here, and as trustees, they have a fiduciary obligations not to cause us harm. Hence, in there it says, nothing can be done to the prejudice of the people. So that's the relationship.
Where's that bit?
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. Hang on. Control find people. There. No declaration. Okay. Yeah, there you go. As the claim, we demand and insist upon all of these claims we've made as our undoubted rights and liberties, and that no declaration, judgments, doing or proceedings to the prejudice of the people in anything that's in there can in any way be drawn into consequence or example. So this here is the acceptance of the Crown, is that this applies to all of the people. And it binds, they've agreed, this binds future bloodlines, the heirs to the bloodline, and it binds all future people, ministers and agents and MPs and everybody to this document. Therefore, because this is the document that created the legal fictions, okay, the crown and royal dignity of the kingdoms, created the monarch, and hence, on the authority of an Act of Parliament, the monarch, at that time, the gracious Queen Elizabeth II, we now know who that is. We know now where they got that authority from, the Bill of Rights. Parliament, the House of Lords, Lord Spiritual, Lords Temporal, and the Commons, we know where they got their authority from. Okay? And we know now why it says by authority of same. Now, what does advice and consent say to you? Contract, advice and consent. Acts of Parliament are advice and consent. That's it. And it's only binding upon those who agree. This all together, okay, is the Coronation Oath Act. Okay, because this is part of the terms and agreement. So I'll finish on this one, but hopefully you'll see how this all ties together. Oh, thousands of hours. I mean, I've spent... But it's only because I have my contracting background. That's the only reason I look at this stuff. Most people just don't... It's alien to most people. Okay? So basically, what's an oath? Equity. My word is my bond. I walk my talk. Good faith. I don't put my self-interest above anybody else's. And clean hands. Everything's open and honest, transparent. I've just shown you this all. Perfectly equitable. So... what does the first one say? Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the people of this kingdom and the dominions thereto belonging, according to statutes in Parliament agreed on? So what are statutes in Parliament? Statutes we now call legislation. Therefore, Acts of Parliament are company policy as to how they will deliver the goods. And what are the goods? The goods are to govern the people, govern the people to the laws and customs of the same. They govern us according to our laws. Why? We create our laws in the courts, and all are equal under the law, and all of the people are bound, and therefore they can do nothing else. They have no authority to do anything other than the law of the land. Okay? So there you go. There's parliamentary sovereignty. Okay? They can tell you nothing.
So this is how it relates to counterpacts, but it means nothing.
No, they're not private companies. They're not private companies.
Councils.
Okay, in a nutshell, Mark, what has this got to do with council tax?
This is why you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to do anything the government tells you. So 15-minute cities, council tax, I can't remember, vaccines, whatever else. Okay? So do you see how using just fundamental basics, that sorts out the whole bloody problem. So let's get back to basics. Okay? And I've just used their website to show you that they have no power over you. It's an illusion.
That is all lie. That's all.
This is all current statute law.
So when they say, oh, it's all
Okay, with our notices, what do? Actually, to really reinforce this point, with Debbie, with the code line up in the Wirral, okay, we cross-examined the policeman. They denied me the right to cross-examine. So it was Debbie asking to state his oath, affirmation, or attestation. Again, we need to be careful with what we ask. Ask the wrong thing, you get the wrong answer. If you ask a policeman, are you acting under your oath? Most of them haven't done an oath. Okay? Most of them have got an attestation, because oaths are from the olden days when you were religious. So you've got to be clear. Are you acting under your oath, affirmation, or attestation? Because if they've attested, if they said, yes, I'm acting under the oath, guess what? They're lying to you. We've got to be careful what we do. Ask the wrong questions, you get the wrong answers. Okay? So, again, he could recite his oath, his attestation. So I said, why did you breach Debbie's peace? What lawful excuse did you have? Regulation, blah, blah, blah. More than 2 people. Regulation, you just stated your oath is to act according to law. Do the 2 words sound the same to you? So, said to him, are you familiar, do you know what law is? Are you familiar with the Act of Settlement 1700, which Parliament defines the word law as our birthright, your birthright, my birthright, everybody's birthright. The barrister, okay, another trained legal profession, not just a solicitor, this one's gone through even more education, turned around and said, that's all, you can't use it. I'm not kidding you, I've got this on recording. Okay, I record word of what. Okay? And so I thought, pardon? How old must something be then? 3 months? 6 months? 1 year? 5 years? 10 years? So then the next question, Debbie, just ask him how does he do this job if he doesn't know the difference between regulation and legislation? Law. So she asked, if you don't know the difference between legislation and law, how can you do your job? Next thing, the magistrate turns around and says, the bench is telling you the police do not need to know the difference between legislation, regulation, or law. Okay? That is the problem we face, ignorance. Okay? This is the true problem. So hopefully you can see with what I've been through tonight that, look, it's up to us to stop this nonsense. It's not complicated. Okay? All right?
Well, I've not been paying council tax since 2012.
Yeah.
And obviously I understand a number of times. As you said, magistrates ignore to a great extent. First 2 times I was turned over. The third time I went into court, and my tactic was simply to say, I used 2 precedents, or 3 precedents. The first one was that I had an inalienable right to
shelter.
trial by jury on
Yeah.
jurisdiction.
This is all stuff detailed.
This is the most equitable thought that I get. And I then said, as affirmed by Magna Carta 12, Magna Carta Treaty 12 or 15 sections.
You may as well rely on their own legislation. They accept trial by jury under Magna Carta 1297.
I know, but of course they accept it in felonies, in serious crimes. They just simply accept it.
No, it's no restriction. You have right to trial by jury. Everything.
What happens?
Did you say for everything?
Everything. Absolutely everything. If you want.
It's our universal right.
I mean, I'm personally not a friend of trial by jury, by the way. I think it's insane.
But the thing is that if you're being tried by a magistrate or a judge, they're being paid by the government, and therefore they're breaching immediately the principle that you shouldn't be a judge in a case if your case is against the government.
No, look, I haven't covered all the detail, okay? The judiciary Okay, there's independence.
No, I-
There you go, the second promise, cause law and justice. That's your independent judiciary. That there again is affirmed in the Constitutional Reform Act 2005. The judiciary is independent. And guess what? Not only is the judiciary independent, the law is enforced by the police. Okay? Every single policeman is independent of the independence of the judiciary. Every judge is independent of the independence. Why?
Well,
Correct.
I mean, the effect was, on the first occasion I did that, the magistrates got up and backed up, slightly as you described right at the beginning, and I stepped down into the well, and I actually kept my head the first time, and I said to the most senior person, the magistrates having abandoned the course without explanation, as the most senior person...
Did he abandon it or did he adjourn
well,
it?
I termed it as abandoning it.
It doesn't matter what you term it. But anyway, you got more liability orders, I'm guessing.
Well, they sent, but they've given up.
I just want to tell you what's going on with council taxes in the court, because this is mega, what's happening, okay? And just quickly, okay, on my precedent, or whatever you want to call it, okay, for £15.45, I think it was, Liverpool Council withdrew their claim of council tax against me. Or £15.45.